The first thing you noticed was the smell. It wasn't just sweat, it was a potent cocktail of rust, ammonia, industrial cleaner, and something else. Something primal, like hot metal and desperation. It was the smell of Iron Asylum, the most dangerous gym in America, and it hit you in the face like a wet towel the second you pushed through the graffiti-covered steel door. The second thing you noticed was the silence. Not an absence of sound. The air was thick with the clang of weights, the grunt of effort, the relentless thump of gangster rap from blown-out speakers. But a silence in the eyes of the people. They didn't look at you. They looked through you, assessing your threat level, your potential, or your imminent failure. I stood there, a duffel bag holding everything I owned slung over my shoulder, feeling like a ghost who'd accidentally wandered into a gladiator pit. The gym was a cavernous space in a condemned-looking warehouse on the industrial west side of the city. There were no mirrors, no chrome machines, no smoothie bar. There were rusted barbells bent from years of max lifts, homemade sleds loaded with cinder blocks, heavy bags hanging like slaughtered animals, and a fighting cage in the corner with bloodstains on the canvas that no amount of scrubbing could remove. The light was harsh, fluorescent, revealing every crack in the concrete floor, every scar on the bodies that moved through the space with a lethal, purposeful grace. And in the center of it all, like a king holding court in a junkyard, was Mason Mall Jones, owner, head trainer, legend. He was perched on the edge of a weight bench, wrapping his hands with strips of white cloth. He wasn't the biggest man in the room. That honor went to a bearded giant known as Bear, who was currently deadlifting what looked like a small car engine, but he commanded the most space. He had the kind of weathered, lived-in face that suggested he'd fought every fight the hard way, from the streets to the ring to whatever this place was. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jawline. His eyes, when they finally flicked up and landed on me, were the color of old whiskey and just as intoxicatingly dangerous. I'd heard the stories. Iron Asylum wasn't a gym you joined. It was a gym you survived. It was where fighters went to get mean before a bout, where bouncers went to learn how to really hurt someone, where lost souls went to either find themselves or lose themselves completely. The membership fee wasn't just money. It was a piece of your comfort, your safety, your peace of mind. I was here because I'd run out of every other option. My life had been a series of gentle declines that had recently turned into a sheer cliff. Lost job, eviction notice, a phone full of numbers that no longer answered. I'd hit a bottom so deep I could see the Earth's core. In a moment of clarity, or madness, I remembered an article I'd read years ago, a profile of Mason Jones. The headline, "Training Arms and Armor at America's Last Real Gym." The article talked about discipline, transformation, and a brutal kind of salvation. It was either this or a shelter cot. I chose the potential for armor. Maul finished his wrapping his hands. He didn't stand up. "You lost, kid?" His voice was a low rasp like gravel under a boot. "No, sir," I said, my own voice sounding thin and reedy in the vast space. "I'm here to train." A few heads turned. A woman with a shaved head and intricate sleeve tattoos who was slamming a sledgehammer against a massive tire paused to smirk. A man with a neck as thick as my thigh let out a soft snort as he did pull-ups with a chain wrapped around his waist. Maul's expression didn't change. "This ain't a Planet Fitness. We don't do Zumba. We don't have elliptical machines. We build fighters. We build survivors. You look like neither." The truth of it burned. I was skinny. Not in a lean way, but in a skip-too-many-meals way. My posture was defensive. I looked like what I was. Prey. "I need to not be this anymore," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could filter them. That got his attention. His whiskey-colored eyes narrowed slightly. He looked me up and down, a mechanic assessing a totaled car. "What's in the back?" "Everything I have." Another beat of silence. The gym's normal rhythm resumed around us, but I felt the focus still lingering. "You homeless?" "Effectively." He nodded slowly, as if I had just confirmed a diagnosis. "We got a deal here, for special cases. You work, you clean, you spot, You do whatever the hell I say. You don't complain, you don't steal, you don't bring your outside drama in here. In return, you get a locker for your shit, a cot in the back room, and 1 meal a day. You get access to the gym when it's not peak hours. You train when I tell you to train, how I tell you to train. You last a month, we talk about real membership. You don't last, he shrugged, a gesture that encompassed the door, the city, the great indifferent void outside. Understood? Understood. Good. Locker room's through there, stow your gear, then meet me at the sled. Your first lesson starts now. The cot was in a glorified broom closet, smelling of mildew and bleach. It was perfect. It was mine. I changed into a pair of old shorts and a t-shirt, my heart pounding with a nervous energy that felt suspiciously like hope. The sled was a simple metal plate with poles, loaded with 3 heavy sandbags. Maul was waiting, arms crossed. "This is your new best friend," he said, not smiling. "Push it from here to that wall and back. That's 1 lap. Do 10. It sounded simple. It was hell. The sled dug into the concrete, fighting me every inch. By the 3rd lap, my lungs were on fire, my legs screaming, my hands raw from gripping the poles. The gym blurred around me. I heard a few laughs, a few muttered comments. I pushed on, fueled by humiliation and the absolute refusal to be laughed out on my first day. On the 7th lap, my legs gave out. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, the sled barely halfway to the wall. Failure tasted like copper and bile. I braced for the shouting, for the dismissal. Instead, a shadow fell over me. Maul crouched down, his face level with mine. He wasn't angry. He looked curious. "What's your name, kid?" I said Alex, my heart pounding with a nervous energy that felt suspiciously like hope. "Alex, look at me." I forced my eyes up to his. "You're breathing wrong. You're pushing with your quads, not your glutes. You're trying to muscle through it. This ain't about muscle. Not yet. It's about will. It's about heart." He stood up and pointed at the sled. "Now, get your damn breath. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Then, you're going to plant your feet like you're trying to crack the concrete, and you're going to drive with your ass. You're going to finish this lap, and then you're going to do 3 more. It wasn't kindness. It was a correction. But it was instruction. It was investment. He believed I could do it. In that moment, that belief was a stronger fuel than any protein shake. I finished the 10 laps. I vomited in a trash can afterward. Maul tossed me a water bottle. "Not the worst I've seen. Showers in the back. Cold water only. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late." That was my introduction to Iron Asylum. My days fell into a brutal, sacred routine. 5 a.m. Wake up on the cot. Clean the gym from the night before. Mop the floors. Wipe down every piece of equipment. Scour the bathrooms that saw more violence than most emergency rooms. 7 a.m. Help open. Spot for the early crew. Mostly night workers and insomniacs with demons to outrun. 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. My training window. Maul would appear, often without a word, and put me through a circuit that felt designed by a sadist. Sled pushes, prowler drags, endless sets of bodyweight exercises until I collapsed. The focus was never on looking good, it was on enduring. "Anyone can look strong when they're fresh," he'd grunt. "I need to know what you're made of when you're broken." Afternoon, more cleaning, more odd jobs. Running errands for Maul, picking up supplies, helping repair equipment with Bear, who was surprisingly gentle for a man of his size and had an encyclopedic knowledge of welding. Evening, the main event. The gym came alive with its true characters. There was Doc, an ex-military medic who could tape a sprain or stitch a cut with chilling efficiency. Raven, the tattooed woman with the sledgehammer, was a professional MMA fighter whose hands were registered lethal weapons. Whisper, a lean, quiet man who moved like smoke and taught a terrifyingly effective form of close-quarters combat. And a rotating cast of street fighters, aspiring pros, and hard-luck cases like me. I was the ghost again, but now a familiar one. I was Maul's project, the kid who slept in the closet. I earned nods instead of sneers by working hard and staying out of the way. I learned to wrap hands, to spot correctly, to listen. One night, about 3 weeks in, I was wiping down the heavy bags after closing.
Raven was still there, shadowboxing in front of a cracked full-length mirror someone had leaned against a wall. She moved with a predatory grace, her fists slicing the air. She caught me watching. "You ever sparred, closet boy?" she asked, not stopping her movement. "No," I said. "Maul's got you doing all this grunt work, building your engine, but an engine's no good if the chassis folds at the first touch." She nodded toward the cage. "Put on some gloves." It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. My stomach dropped. I'd seen her spar. She dismantled grown men. 5 minutes later, I was standing across from her in the cage, wearing 16-ounce gloves that felt like pillows on my untested hands. Maul leaned against the cage door, watching silently. "Touch my head," Raven said, "just once." I tried. I jabbed. She slipped it so easily I almost fell over. I tried a clumsy combination. She weaved under it and tapped me lightly on the temple with her glove. "You're telegraphing everything. It's in your eyes and your shoulders." For the next 10 minutes, she schooled me, not with pain, but with frustrating, humiliating precision. I couldn't touch her, not once. By the end, I was panting, frustrated, my ego in tatters. I slumped against the cage. Raven pulled off her gloves. "You're not weak," she said, matter-of-factly. "You're untrained. There's a difference. Weakness is a choice. Being untrained is just the starting point." She looked at Maul. "He's got heart. He didn't quit." Maul just grunted. "Shower, then sleep. You're on bag duty with Whisper tomorrow at 6 a.m. It was the closest thing to praise I'd gotten. The weeks turned into a month. My body changed. The scrawny frame filled out with hard, functional muscle. The cot felt less like a sentence and more like a monk's pallet. I could push the sled with the sandbags without wanting to die. I could last 3 rounds on the heavy bag before my arms turned to lead. The month mark arrived. I stood in front of Maul in his tiny, cluttered office that smelled of old coffee and liniment. He didn't offer me a seat. "Your month is up," he said, looking over a ledger. "Yes, sir. You cleaned well. You didn't steal. You didn't bring any drama. You took your beatings and kept coming back." He closed the ledger and looked at me. "You want to stay?" "More than anything," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd ever said. "Good. New deal. You get a small stipend, enough for clothes, toiletries. You keep the cot. You keep getting 1 meal. But now you train with the evening group. You start sparring, light, controlled. You learn for real." He leaned forward. "But understand something, Alex. This isn't a charity turning into a club. You're in the system now. The asylum owns a piece of you. You represent this place inside and out. You get into trouble, you come to me. You see trouble for one of ours, you handle it or you bring it to me. This is a family. A dysfunctional, violent, beautiful family. You in or you out?" There was no hesitation. "I'm in." A ghost of a smile touched his scarred face. "Welcome to the asylum."
Life took on a new intensity. Training with the evening group was a quantum leap in difficulty. The light, controlled sparring with Whisper left me bruised and enlightened. He didn't just hit me, he explained why he could hit me. I learned about angles, distance, the geometry of violence. Raven would drill me on combos until they were muscle memory. Bear taught me the basics of powerlifting, the sacred trinity of squat, bench, and deadlift. "Strength is never a weakness," he'd rumble in his bass voice. And Maul was always there, watching, correcting, pushing. He began to teach me the philosophy behind the pain. "This gym isn't about getting big for the beach," he said one day as we taped my aching wrists. "It's about forging a will. The weights, the bag, the sparring, they're just the fire. You're in the metal. Every rep, every punch, every time you want to quit but don't, that's the hammer. We're beating the softness out of you. We're beating in a spine." I started to see the results outside the gym. My walk changed. My gaze was steadier. The world, which had felt like a series of looming threats, began to feel like a series of manageable challenges. I wasn't fearless, but I was less afraid. Then came the night of the real test. It was a Friday, late. The gym was mostly empty, just me, Maul, and Doc, who was inventorying the first aid kit. I was finishing my cooldown on the stationary bike when the front door burst open. Not the gentle push of a member, but a violent slam. 3 men walked in. They weren't here to train. They wore street clothes, their eyes sharp and scanning.
The lead guy had a snake tattoo coiling up his neck. I recognized the type immediately. Trouble, the kind that collects protection money. "Mason Jones," Snake Tattoo said, his voice slick. Maul didn't look up from the barbell he was cleaning. "We're closed." "This won't take long. We're here about the Neighborhood Business Association dues. You're behind." "I'm not in an association," Maul said, his tone bored. "See, that's the problem. Everyone's in the association. It's mandatory for community safety." The man's two friends fanned out slightly. One picked up a 10-pound plate and idly tossed it in his hand. The air in the gym changed. It became still, charged. Doc quietly closed the first aid kit and stood up, his posture relaxed but ready. Maul finally set down the barbell and turned around. He moved with a deliberate slowness that was more threatening than any rush. "You're scuffing my floor with those dirty shoes," Maul said, his voice dropping into that gravelly rasp. "And you're interrupting my gym's peace. That's 2 strikes." The man with the plate laughed. "You're going to give us a third, old man?" That's when I moved. I didn't think. I slid off the bike and positioned myself slightly to Maul's left and behind him. Not in front, not hiding. It was a spotter's position. A "we're in this together" position. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. Snake Tattoo's eyes flicked to me, then back to Maul, reassessing. The dynamic had shifted. It wasn't one old man and a kid anymore. It was a unit. Maul didn't look at me, but I saw the slightest nod of his head. He took a step forward. "Strike 3. Get out of my gym." For a second, violence hung in the balance. The man's hand drifted toward his waistband. Maul's stance shifted imperceptibly, weight balanced, hands loose at his sides. The stance Whisper had drilled into me for hours. Then Snake Tattoo smiled, a cold, mirthless thing. "This isn't over, Jones. We'll be seeing you." He jerked his head toward the door. His goons followed, the one dropping the weight plate with a loud clang that echoed in the silent gym. The door swung shut. The tension drained, leaving a buzzing aftermath. Doc let out a low whistle. Maul turned and looked at me. He studied me for a long moment, his whiskey-colored eyes taking in my stance, my face, the absence of panic. "You didn't run," he stated. "I told you not to bring drama in," I said. Didn't say anything about what to do when it walks in on its own. A real smile, the first genuine one I had ever seen from him, broke across Maul's face. It transformed him. No, I suppose I didn't. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Good instinct taking the flank. Never crowd your corner." He walked toward his office, then paused at the door. He looked back at me, standing there in the quiet, dangerous sanctuary he had built. "Hey," he said, his voice softer now. "You make it through?" I understood the question. It wasn't about the 3 thugs. It was about the sled on the first day. The vomiting, the exhaustion, the humiliation, the grueling month, the fear. It was about hitting bottom and choosing to look up instead of digging down. I met his gaze. "Yeah, Maul, I made it through." He nodded, satisfied. "Then we're just getting started. Lock up, will ya, and hit the lights." He disappeared into his office. I stood alone in the darkening gym, the smell of rust and effort and home filling my lungs. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was part of the silence. I was part of the fight. I had made it through the fire, and I was ready for whatever came next.
The real education, however, happened outside the ring and the rack. It happened in the spaces between sets, in the shared silence of exhaustion, in the stories that emerged like steam from a hard-working body. I learned that Bear, the gentle giant, had lost his family in a fire years ago. The gym, the iron, the act of moving immense weight was his therapy. "It gives the grief something to do," he told me once, his eyes distant as he loaded a barbell. "Instead of eating me from the inside, it fuels the lift." He didn't lift to get big, he lifted to stay sane. Every deadlift was a negotiation with the weight of his past.
Every completed rep was a small victory over the void. Doc, the ex-military medic, had seen too much in a desert on the other side of the world. The orderly brutality of the gym, the clear cause and effect of a training session, was his anchor to a world that made sense. "Here, a wound is clean," he said one evening, taping my split knuckles with practiced gentle hands. "You see the cut, you clean it, you fix it. Out there," he trailed off, snipping the athletic tape with a pair of medical shears. "Out there, the wounds are messy. They don't always bleed where you can see." The asylum was his triage center, not for bodies, but for souls. He kept us patched up, both physically and, in his quiet way, emotionally. And Raven had fought her way out of a neighborhood that chewed up girls like her and spat out statistics. The cage was her canvas, her violence a form of art and emancipation. "They used to tell me I was too pretty to fight," she smirked one night, her hands a blur as she worked the mitts I held. "Then they said I fought too pretty. Now they just get out of my way." Her strikes were poetry written in pain, each combination a stanza of survival. She taught me that strength wasn't just physical, it was the audacity to define yourself in a world hell-bent on defining you first. Maul himself remained an enigma, but pieces surfaced over time, like fossils revealed by erosion. The scar came from a broken bottle in a bar fight he didn't start, but definitely finished. A fight over a friend who couldn't fight for himself. The gym was built with money saved from underground fight winnings and a stubborn refusal to ever work a respectable job again. "Respectable means asking for permission," he grunted, when I asked why he never tried to make the place look nicer. "I don't ask for permission." He was a self-made sovereign of this concrete kingdom, and his laws were simple. Work hard, be loyal, don't be a victim. I was becoming a part of this tapestry. My own story, the job loss, the eviction, the hollowed-out desperation that had led me to his door, wasn't unique here. It was the common origin story, the first chapter in every biography in this room. The asylum was where we came to rip out that first chapter and start writing a new one with calloused hands. The outside world began to test my new armor in small, profound ways. On a rare afternoon off, I went to a discount store for socks and a new toothbrush. A guy in line, all puffed up chest and loud talk, bumped into me hard and then tried to make it my fault, getting in my face, his breath smelling of cheap beer. "Watch where you're going, asshole." A year ago, I would have mumbled an apology, eyes downcast, heat flooding my cheeks as a dozen eyes turned to watch the spectacle of my humiliation. That day, something different happened. The fear sparked, but it hit a new layer inside me, a layer of forged steel. I didn't glare. I didn't puff up my chest. I just stood in the posture Whisper had drilled me with for countless hours, balanced on the balls of my feet, shoulders relaxed, hands loose but ready. I turned to face him fully, and I just looked at him. I didn't say a word. I just made eye contact and held it, my expression neutral, unimpressed. And he saw something, not aggression, not a challenge to duel, but an utter absence of fear. He saw a man who was not rattled, who was rooted, who would not be moved by bluster. His bravado faltered. The script in his head, which depended on my cowering, had no next line. He muttered, "Whatever, man," and turned away, suddenly fascinated by a display of energy drinks. The victory was quiet, internal, and seismic. I hadn't thrown a punch. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't needed to. My peace, my safety, my dignity were no longer conditional currencies dependent on someone else's mood. They were properties of me. That was the real strength Maul was selling. Not the ability to inflict violence, but the profound power to render it unnecessary.
The shakedown crew, true to their word, came back. It was a Tuesday, raining so hard the streets were rivers. The sound masked their approach. Snake Tattoo returned, this time with 4 guys, all harder looking than the last batch. They had learned. They waited until just after closing, when the last regular had waved goodbye, and it was only Maul, Bear, and me inside, counting the day's meager cash drop.
The moment the steel door slammed open against the wall, Maul was already moving. He didn't wait for a speech, a demand, a negotiation. His military past snapped into the present. "Alex, behind the counter, now." "Bear." His voice was a whip-crack of command, devoid of fear, full of intent. I moved, not to hide, but with purpose, to the space behind the front counter where the old, corded landline phone and the legal aluminum baseball bat were kept. Bear didn't roar or posture. He simply stood up from the bench he was wiping down. The act of him unfolding to his full height was somehow more threatening than any shout. His presence suddenly filled the front of the gym like a rising tide of quiet menace. "We gave you a chance to be smart," Snake Tattoo snarled, pulling a lead pipe from inside his jacket. His eyes were jumpy. This was about pride now, not money. "You gave me a chance to be bored," Maul replied. He was circling slightly, a predator assessing the pack, putting himself physically between the crew and me. "You picked the wrong zoo to monkey around in. Last warning, walk out that door." One of the new guys, twitchy and hopped up on something, made the first and last mistake. He lunged at Bear with a switchblade, a quick, stupid flash of steel. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Bear's hand, big as a dinner plate and faster than seemed possible for its size, shot out and caught the wrist. There was a sickening, wet crack that cut through the drumming rain. The man's scream was high and sharp. The knife clattered to the concrete. Bear didn't hit him, he just shoved, a massive palm to the chest. The man flew back as if yanked by a wire and crumpled into a rack of dumbbells with a crash of metal. Chaos erupted, but it was a short, brutal chaos. Two men went for Maul. He didn't fight like a brawler. He fought like a mechanic disassembling faulty machinery. No wasted motion. A parry of a wild swing. A sharp, piston-driven elbow into a solar plexus that dropped a man gasping. A sweeping kick to the side of another's knee. There was a pop. The man screamed and went down. Maul fought with the chilling, economical efficiency of someone for whom violence was a first language, spoken fluently, but only when necessary. Snake Tattoo, seeing his crew folding in seconds, made his play. He came straight for me, pipe raised high for a crushing blow. Time didn't slow down. It became incredibly clear, hyper-focused. The rain on the roof was a roar. The grunts of pain were distant. Whisper's voice was in my head, calm and clear. "Don't meet force with force. You are water. Redirect." I didn't try to block the pipe. As it swung down in a murderous arc, I sidestepped inside the swing, close to his body. I grabbed his extended arm with both hands, one on his wrist, one above his elbow, and used his own forward momentum, pulling him down and across my hip. It was the Osoto Gari throw Whisper had drilled with me 100 times on the mats. He crashed into the front counter back first, the wind exploding from his lungs in a pained whoosh. The pipe clattered from his stunned grip. Before he could suck in a breath to recover, I brought the baseball bat down. Not on him, but on the pipe where it lay on the floor between us. The aluminum on steel bang was deafening in the enclosed space. The pipe jumped and skittered away into the darkness under a bench. I leveled the bat, holding it horizontally between us, a barrier, not a weapon. "Get out," I said. My voice was low, steady, colder than the rain outside. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like the voice of the asylum itself. He looked from me to where Maul was standing over his two moaning friends, to Bear who was looming like a wrathful mountain, his expression unchanging. The fight, the pride, the stupid ambition drained from Snake Tattoo's face, replaced with the cold, greasy realization that he'd bet on the wrong kind of tough. He'd confused street corner menace with the disciplined, protective violence of a tribe. They left, a pathetic, wet, limping retreat into the sheeting rain, dragging their injured, swallowed by the gloom. Maul locked the heavy door, sliding the new bolt he'd installed after their first visit. He turned. He was breathing heavily, a fresh, shallow cut bleeding above his eyebrow. He looked at Bear, who gave a single, silent nod. Then his whiskey-colored eyes found me. I was still holding the bat, my knuckles white around the grip, my body thrumming with a strange, calm energy. "You used the throw Whisper showed you," he stated, wiping blood from his brow with the back of his hand. "Yes. You didn't swing for his head. You had the opening." "No." Why? The question wasn't an accusation. It was an exam. Because I didn't have to, I said. The truth of it's simple and absolute. The goal wasn't to hurt him. The goal was to make him leave. The throw and the noise did that. Mal stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then a slow, fierce grin spread across his scarred face, transforming it. It was the grin of a master seeing his apprentice finally understand the fundamental lesson. He walked over, pried the bat from my stiff fingers, and placed it back in its corner. Then he put a heavy, calloused hand on my shoulder, his grip firm, almost painful. "You're not making it through anymore, kid," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp of pure approval. "You've arrived." That night was my second baptism, far more significant than the first. It wasn't about surviving, it was about belonging. A week later, Mal slid a key across the front counter to me. Not just the key to the janitor's closet, but a master key to the front door, the back door, the office. Opening and closing is your job now. Lights, alarms, cash drop box, don't fuck it up. The ultimate trust. The cot in the closet started to feel less like a desperate necessity and more like a conscious, almost monastic choice. I was saving my small stipend, scanning listings for studio apartments in the weathered but alive neighborhood around the gym. I was no longer building a barricade against the world, I was building a life within it. A life with contours I had forged myself.
A few months later, a new kid walked in. It was a slow Thursday afternoon. He was maybe 19, drowning in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, his eyes darting around like a scared animal taking in the sights of a slaughterhouse. He had that hollow, hungry look I knew in my bones, in the ghost memory of my own reflection. Mal was in the back office on a supplier call, so the kid drifted toward me like a leaf on a current as I re-racked a pyramid of 45-pound plates. Excuse me, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Is this where Mason Jones is?" I stopped and looked at him. I saw myself in the slouch of his shoulders, in the way he held his arms tight to his body as if making himself smaller. "Yeah," I said, my voice neutral. "This is his place. You looking for him?" I need to train," he swallowed hard. I need to not be this anymore." The words were a broken, desperate echo, spoken from the same cliff edge I'd once stood upon. The gym was its usual symphony of dissonant effort around us. The metronome clang of iron, the rhythmic thump of the heavy bag, Raven's sharp, explosive exhales as she worked mitts with a new fighter. I looked at this kid, at the doorway to his potential salvation or his final, definitive breaking point. Mal emerged from the office, spotting the situation immediately. He didn't intervene. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest, his face unreadable. He was watching me. This was my test, not of strength or courage, but of stewardship, of passing on the flame. I turned fully to the kid. "This isn't a regular gym," I said, my voice taking on a calm, matter-of-fact tone I'd unconsciously absorbed from Mal. "There's no shiny machines, no TV screens. No one's going to hold your hand or tell you you're doing great when you're not. You earn everything here, every ounce of respect, every bit of strength. You earn it with sweat, with work, with showing up when you don't want to, with heart. You think you can do that?" He swallowed again, a hard lump bobbing in his thin throat. His eyes made a frantic tour, from my face to the intimidating, brutal expanse of the gym, to the fierce, focused individuals populating it like sculptures of effort. He saw the sheer scale of the undertaking, the visceral reality of the challenge. Then his gaze circled back and landed on me. Maybe he saw something in my eyes, in my posture. Not a finished product, not a superhero, but a work in progress, a living testament to the possible. "I can try," he whispered, the words full of fear and a fragile, stubborn hope. I glanced at Mal. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Permission. Mandate. "Trying's the only way any of us started," I said. I pointed a thumb toward the infamous sled sitting empty and ominous in the far corner. "That's your new best friend. It's gonna hate you,
And you're gonna hate it. And that's how you know it's working. As I led the terrified, hopeful kid across the gym floor, I caught my reflection in the dull, scratched metal of the weight rack. I didn't see the ghost anymore. I didn't see the scared, skinny guy clutching a duffel bag. I saw a man with shoulders that carried weight, eyes that held a steady calm, and a quiet, unshakable confidence that came not from arrogance, but from knowing what he was made of. I saw a piece of the asylum, living and breathing. Later, after putting the new kid through his own first brutalizing, puke-inducing sled session and showing him the familiar mildew-scented cot in the closet, I found Maul at his desk, doing the monthly books, the numbers lit by the glow of a single lamp. "Make it through?" Maul asked without looking up, his pen scratching on paper. "He finished his laps," I said, leaning against the door frame. "He puked in the same trash can. He got back up. So yeah, he made it through the first fire." Maul finally looked up, that rare, genuine smile, the one that reached his eyes and softened the scars, touched his lips. "Good." He nodded toward the gym floor beyond the office window. "He's your responsibility now. His progress, his attitude, his work ethic. You're his first point of contact, his guide. Don't let him down, and more importantly, don't let him down." The weight of the responsibility settled on me, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an honor, like a sacred baton being passed. It was the final, intricate piece of the armor Maul had been helping me forge all these months. I wasn't just a survivor or a fighter they tolerated. I was a link in the chain, a guide for the next lost soul who stumbled into this concrete sanctuary looking for a forge. That night, after the kid was asleep in his closet and the last member had left, I went through the closing routine alone, wiping down equipment, turning off banks of lights, checking the back door. Finally, I stood by the front entrance, hand on the deadbolt. I looked back into the silent, dark gym. The smell, rust, old sweat, leather, effort, triumph, was familiar and essential as my own breath. The echoes of 1,000 grunts, the ghostly clang of 1,000 lifted weights seemed to hum in the air, a permanent energy imprinted on the space. I had come here with nothing but a duffel bag of failure and a breaking point. I was leaving this building tonight, but not the asylum. I was leaving with a body remodeled into resilient wire and sinew, a mind sharpened by relentless discipline, a spirit tempered in a very specific, unforgiving fire, and a key to a kingdom built not on gold, but on sweat, loyalty, and earned respect. Maul's question from that pivotal night echoed in the stillness, now a cornerstone of my new philosophy, a question I would one day ask another scared kid. "Hey, make it through?" I turned the key in the deadbolt. The solid, definitive click was a perfect full stop to the day, and a comma in the story of my life. I lifted my eyes to the words spray-painted in rough, black letters above the door on the inside, words visible only as you were leaving, the final message from the asylum to those who had entered its crucible. "Abandon all softness, ye who enter." A smile touched my lips, not fierce, but peaceful. I had, and in its place, I'd found something unbreakable. "Yeah, Maul," I said, to the empty, powerful, sacred space that had remade me. "I made it through." I turned off the last light, stepped out into the buzzing neon and echoing sirens of the city night, and pulled the steel door shut behind me. The lock engaged with a heavy, satisfying thud. I didn't walk into the darkness. I walked into my life.